But why Bitcoin over DigiCash or over BitGold or any of these other projects? It was just one of those right place, right time things and the right community. And of course, with all successful things, the minute you have a successful thing, it seldom is the thing that ends up being around forever. We created Ethereum not because someone told us to. We created it because we were frustrated with Bitcoin. We were like doing color coins and Mastercoin and all these other projects on top of Bitcoin, just trying to get Bitcoin to do useful things. And it was like being dragged through a swamp full of razor blades. It was a horrible process. We said, screw it. Let's create a programming language to go with a blockchain. And then why did I create Cardano? I created Cardano because Ethereum, in my view, is not going to be able to meet the challenges of a global scale system. So we went and did that. Whoever is the prophet who leads people out of the cave usually gets his own religion. So Satoshi got one. And of course, like all true deities, he's dead. Satoshi's alias is gone and it's buried. And even if Satoshi was to return, there's no way to convince people that that person's Satoshi. Like if you sign with the PGP key, people will be, oh, well, you stole it or you hacked it or something. Hey, Lenstra's research has gotten to the point where we could break a 1K RSA key. So, clever guy, or something like that. All right. No one actually will believe you're the prophet after the prophet has ascended into the heavens. So it makes perfect sense. And it's just people who need hope. When you lose faith in institutions and governments, you need to find faith somewhere. And so they've traded faith in government or religion or whatever to faith in code and faith in that culture. And they believe if only they're a good enough prophet, they're a good enough cleric, they're good enough priest of the cult of Satoshi, then they shall be rewarded. In this particular case, it's with wealth and power and being part of this new economic order. So that maximalism is predictable and it's extremely harmful to the project as a whole. Because the reality was the project was pedagogical. The whole point of it was supposed to demonstrate that you could have decentralized value. You could teleport it around the world and to get people into the mindset of, well, what else can you do? And go and do the next thing. It was never intended to become a religion, but it became one because humans are humans. It's almost like the Warhammer 40K universe with the God Emperor. When he was living in the universe, he was like this secular guy, and he said, venerate, but don't worship me. Then the first thing everybody did after he got constrained to the golden throne is everybody started worshiping him, the corpse god. And it's exactly what's happened with Satoshi. He's become the God Emperor of the 40K universe. People venerate this corpse god and so forth. But it is what it is. And unfortunately, it has infected some people to a point where they have become exceedingly toxic. Anyone who does anything, Ethereum, whatever, it's a coin. It's a bad deal. It's like, we've just brought all these people into the cryptocurrency space. No, it doesn't matter. It's only, but there's only one truth, Bitcoin. We spent 6 years researching proof of stake stuff for Cardano. And, we have a much better protocol in our view. It's been peer reviewed by major academics and major institutions. They say, oh, no, it doesn't work. It can't work. It doesn't follow the vision of Satoshi. That's no longer a rational conversation. It's religious extremism in that respect. And human beings have a tendency to do that. And if you want a great historical analysis of it, read Yuval Harari, his Sapiens book and his follow-on book, Homo Deus. And it gives you a sense of what humans tend to do over the arc of history. There's no reason to hold it over its neighbors. This is one of the reasons why we work so hard with Cardano in particular at trying to build a proper governance system, because you don't want a situation every time you want to do an innovation, you end up with a Cardano Classic or Cardano Cash or these types of things. Bitcoin lost some of its earliest and best people over just the block size, a system parameter. It just tells you if you can't even agree on something so trivial as a block size, then how do you get post-quantum crypto when quantum computers come? How do you get smart contracts? How do you get, new ways of structuring the network stack? How do you move from a replicated model to a decentralized model? How do you throw data away? What happens when the Bitcoin blockchain is a petabyte and only 2 people can have it as NSA and Google? So what do you do with that? And if you can't decide a block size, how the hell do you decide these much more significant and serious things? You need a governance system that sits on top of it. And unfortunately, that's so far beyond the initial vision of Satoshi. That's like going to a bunch of Jews and trying to convince them that, Jesus Christ is their savior. You have a whole new religion, okay? You're not really going to succeed in that respect. You're just, it is what it is. You have to accept that these things coexist. So what usually happens is that when the evolutionary and competitive dynamics of the system are counterproductive to growth beyond a certain point, the system will stall, and then 1,000 flowers will bloom. The vast majority of them will wilt, but some of them will become a mighty oak, and they will replace the old system, and it will assume all the absorb all of the goodness of that system, but not carry the bad characteristics of it.
Mhm.
So you'll still have the blockchain component. You'll still have it be able to settle transactions the way Bitcoin does. The email for money thing will be there, but then you'll have smart contracts and governance and interoperability and much faster capabilities, and the ability to be global scale and work really well on a cell phone and have privacy and all these additional features and functionality. And if that doesn't happen, one of the other 1,000 flowers will have that, and then eventually they'll meet in the middle and kind of merge together and get to the next system and so forth. It's a very Darwinian system in that
Mhm.
respect, and that's a great thing for everybody. Right now, with all cryptocurrencies, it's the same amount of food, you're just adding more chairs around the table. So the more people who show up, the less food for everybody. That's not a sustainable system, and you're not going to get to the scale of millions to billions of users, like we see with Ethereum right now in the gargantuan transaction fees. Move $1, you have to spend $50. It's crazy, and that's by design. It's not a bug or something. It's just how those protocols work. So building truly scalable protocols is a super hard thing, because you have to admit adversaries, and you also have to admit that there's no centralized actor to opt. And then finally, there are 8,000 cryptocurrencies. There's hundreds of legacy financial systems. You need to be interoperable. So whatever the third generation of cryptocurrencies happen to be, it has to do those three things. Your users have to produce as much as they consume so you can sustainably grow to billions. You have to have a Wi-Fi moment where everything just works, and you have to have a governance system that means that when you get to that scale, you don't fragment apart and break apart into 1,000 pieces, or get to a certain point where you just simply can't grow anymore because the firm is too big, if that makes sense. And so we said, let's go do that. And if we do that well, then I'm going to have the cheapest, bestest protocol in the world for economic identity. And I could tangibly go to Ethiopia and all these places and say, hey, how do we get microfinance and microinsurance and these other things to run? It just so happens that that's also the best protocol for America and for the European Union and for China and for other places. And it's an open protocol. So rent-seeking people seeking profit will build on that system. Yeah, so first with Polkadot, had Gavin Wood stayed as CTO of Ethereum, then they probably would have upgraded ETH to ETH2 as ETH2 at Polkadot, and that would have been like a generation 2.5. It wasn't quite as ambitious as ETH2, but it runs. It's actually quite a very practical system, and there's a lot of magic to it, and it does a lot for their ecosystem. So if that alone would give them another 2-3 years to kind of think around and say, how do we get to the next level? Now, the thing about Cardano was that we didn't have the luxury of even Ethereum, because it hadn't launched when we started working on Cardano. They were just starting to get there. They had some test nets, and I had the original vision of Ethereum from when I was CEO there. And so I had kind of that to start with, but we started from first principles, and we started from all the way back to distributed systems stuff in the 1980s, and we kind of worked our way forward. So we wrote a paper defining what is a blockchain. It's called the GKL model. It's one of the most cited papers in the cryptocurrency space, over 900 citations, and it just defines here's what a secure ledger is. And then we looked at a lot of things like the accounting model of Ethereum versus the accounting model of Bitcoin. And what we realized was that Satoshi actually did a lot of stuff right, but there was obvious places where the team or person who built Bitcoin had holes in their computer science knowledge. Because no one is an expert everywhere. So there were places where we could massively improve what Satoshi had done, and we could achieve the same or more of what Ethereum was trying to do, and do it in a way that we felt had a longer time horizon, more viability over a longer arc of time. Like the greatest example of that is the accounting model. So Bitcoin has something called UTXO, and Ethereum has something called counts.